Here's your wrestling news for September 10th, 2022. And we're kicking off today with SmackDown as Drew McIntyre was understandably in a fighting mood on the show. McIntyre had been on the cusp of dethroning Roman Reigns at Clash at the Castle, only to have his plans on being champion thwarted by Solo Sikoa. In an intense match between Sikoa and McIntyre, it seemed like the Bloodline was set to interfere until the Street Profits made sure to keep them at bay. Unfortunately for Drew, it wasn't the Bloodline who made the difference, but Karrion Kross, who attacked Drew out of nowhere, locking him in the cross jacket while Scarlett watched on. With reports that Roman Reigns is set to miss the next WWE event, Extreme Rules, this was a clear way of telling fans that Kross vs. McIntyre is the show's top feud, at least for the time being. Fans can expect a match between the two, possibly to headline Extreme Rules, and expect things to get uglier from here on. SmackDown also saw an impressive display by Ronda Rousey, who has earned herself a SmackDown Women's title match against Liv Morgan. In a 5-way elimination match, Rousey made Natalya, Lacey Evans, Xia Li, and Sonya Deville all tap out, earning a shot at the champ at Extreme Rules. However, what was more interesting was a backstage segment between Rousey and Shayna Baszler, in which the former UFC fighter encouraged Baszler to get vengeance. Rousey and Baszler both come from an MMA background, and it appears that some kind of partnership could be in the works between the two. Whether that partnership ends with Ronda Rousey holding the SmackDown Women's title again, that remains to be seen, but there's certainly strength in numbers, especially if you have Baszler in your corner. For the past 2 years, Roman Reigns and the Bloodline have dominated WWE, leaving fans with no option but to acknowledge their tribal chief. Despite being a heel, Reigns' work has won over fans who booed him as a face, and he's even getting attention from AEW. On SmackDown, the Usos and honorary Uso Sami Zayn had a segment welcoming Solo Sikoa to the Bloodline following his main roster debut at Clash at the Castle. Quickly after the segment, MJF took to Twitter to share an emoji of an index finger pointing upwards, a sign of those who support the Bloodline. MJF has never shied away from making it clear that he enjoys WWE, and with the salt of the earth always teasing leaving AEW for the opposition, perhaps he and the Bloodline will share the ring one day. Reigns' most recent big win came at Clash at the Castle, where he retained against a very game Drew McIntyre in Cardiff, Wales. Now, the undisputed WWE Universal Champion is without a challenger, but there's been some interesting updates about who he will face next. Two names that have been thrown around as of late as possible opponents are Kevin Owens, who called out Reigns during an episode of Raw Talk, and Seth Rollins, the only person to get a premium live event win over the Tribal Chief, albeit via DQ. While both men would make great opponents for Reigns, Dave Meltzer reports that neither Owens nor Rollins are scheduled to face him next. Meltzer didn't say who is the next person to challenge the head of the table, though we know that his next title match will be in November at the Crown Jewel event, meaning Reigns will miss next month's Extreme Rules. With Braun Strowman recently returning, perhaps he will be the one to try and stand up to the Bloodline, but for now, nothing is guaranteed. After AEW All Out, CM Punk had some explosive words to say during the post-show media scrum burying the Elite, his former best friend Colt Cabana, and Hangman Adam Page. Punk's remarks would be a factor in the fight backstage between himself and Ace Steel against the Elite, but his comments weren't some spur-of-the-moment thoughts. In the Wrestling Observer newsletter, Dave Meltzer writes that CM Punk had his comments planned in advance, saying, "One person noted that Punk 2 weeks ago when he returned said that the press conference after the pay-per-view would be interesting." Ryan Alvarez added that many in AEW believe Punk's comments were planned, with Meltzer responding that it was so practiced by the former champion. Punk was certain weeks in advance that the media scrum was going to be interesting, and that's certainly been the case, even if it's overshadowed the entire all-out pay-per-view. Between Punk's comments and the proceeding fight, the Chicago wrestler may soon be fired from AEW if he hasn't been already, so perhaps his planned comments were a bit too interesting for AEW. More from AEW now, as the company has had plenty of drama as of late, and we don't mean with what's been happening on screen. Between the fight, the stripping of the AEW World and Trios tag titles, and multiple injuries, there's been a lot of chaos, and wrestlers are trying to fix things. It's been reported that prior to this week's Dynamite, a meeting was held with talent, hosted by Jon Moxley, Bryan Danielson, and Chris Jericho, and we now know more about what was said. One AEW wrestler said the trio of former world champions were the right people to boost morale, and talent were encouraged to address any issues in-house rather than leaking things to the media. The topic of reports of unhappiness getting out to the public had been an issue discussed in last month's talent meeting, and Moxley, Danielson, and Jericho were all well received for their handling of things. One younger AEW wrestler said Jericho set the perfect example of how people should react, while another called Danielson's presence as calming, and the consensus is Moxley's promo about AEW on this week's Dynamite resonated with a lot of people, especially as he was supposed to be on vacation. CM Punk's days in AEW may be numbered or even over, but the promotion does have their locker room leaders who are working hard to steer the ship during these difficult times. News of problems within AEW has been circulating for over a month now, and those in WWE are well aware of what's going on in the competition. During this week's SmackDown, a line was used which many fans believe was a dig at AEW's ongoing problems. Alluding to the kayfabe incident of Ronda Rousey assaulting Adam Pearce, the commentators stated that she had been disciplined internally after an investigation and that Pearce had gotten carried away. Michael Cole said that the WWE official had aired the dirty laundry publicly, which some have said is a nod to CM Punk and his comments made during the all-out media scrum. AEW can hardly take offense at this comment if it is a dig at them, as they've spent years making reference to WWE, even doing so on this week's Dynamite. Ultimately, AEW has a lot of problems that need to be addressed, and with WWE seeing a noticeable increase in quality post-Vince McMahon, it'll be interesting to see how Tony Khan responds. And we're ending today with more from SmackDown, as Max Dupree has had an interesting time since joining the Blue brand. Being called up over the summer, there was a time when it seemed that Max was done, which was reportedly the last act made by Vince McMahon before retirement, and while he's back on SmackDown, he may be set for another change. On this week's show, the Maximum Male Models and Los Lotharios lost to Hit Row and the Street Profits, and Dupree had some interesting comments off the air. In a digital exclusive, Dupree and his sister Maxine could be seen speaking to Masse and Mansois, and Max said that they have to go through the day to get to the night. The way Max said this line had many fans speculating that he could be returning to his previous LA Knight gimmick, which he worked as in NXT before his call-up to SmackDown. A lot of superstars have had their names changed in recent weeks as part of this post-Vince McMahon era, and perhaps Max Dupree is next on the list. Well guys, that's our news for today. Please share your comments below. Also hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell icon to receive all notifications. And as always, thanks for watching.